Hi everyone, I am standing in front of, and I'm going to pronounce her name incorrectly, even though I do listen to her music, but Chappell Roan's birth chart, and is done up in Huber style, of course, because that's what I mainly study for natal. And the software I'm using is a Regulus Pro Huber edition from Juan Saba down at Cathar Software, and it's excellent for Huber software, Huber charts, and the whole complete Huber system. I was speaking with a colleague today, so just to give you why are we even staring at her birth chart right now. I was having a great chat with a colleague today, and it switched into a topic about in terms of kind of major, I'm not sure what the word was used, meltdowns or kind of being tenacious with something. You should have a look at Chappell Roan's chart right now, because she's taking on the media. Everything is really becoming larger than life for her, and that's a true statement in the sense of, I think we'd all agree that her rise to fame from the early 20s, certainly 2021. I think there was a video or a meme of her performing Pink Pony Club to perhaps 50 people in this kind of park area, as you would. Maybe you couldn't even see a whole lot of fans standing around. It was out in the open somewheres, and it wasn't certainly anything that the camera then switched to, which was her full of light and abundance with, I think, 80,000 people or something in the concert. So quite a rise from 50 to 80,000 from 2021-ish till 2023, and of course now we're at December 2024. So with that being said, I'm going to poke around with age point progression. I have other videos on age point, but just quickly for those that might be interested, I'm going to try to keep this video, by the way, very basic, very simple, so that I'm not going to hide behind a lot of astrological jargon if I can avoid it. The age point is a system. It's an internal timing system. What I mean by that is we're not looking at the outside transits or outside events. It's internal, just as I guess secondary progressions would be. If you're into astrology, you understand what that means. If you don't worry about it. What this is trying to say is that at her birth in 1998, the age point starts here, and it starts moving around, and you can see these kind of 6 years per house. These are houses on the outside. And it goes all the way around the chart until it reaches 72, then starts up again. During that time, it makes aspects to the birth chart and highlights areas that become very important for the individual. Now, it's not going to give you predictions in terms of what will happen to an individual, like horary would, or even solar returns. But what it really showcases well is illuminating the birth chart and pieces of it that are important to us. And what have you. Okay, so I'm trying to kind of explain that a little bit today with her chart, because I think it's really cool. So if we just pan out for a second, this is her birth chart, and you know what? It's, to me, we would fairly straightforward, right? Or at least seemingly. It's not a busy chart. It's got this is what we call an achievement triangle, or a T-square if you must, although it isn't a square, it's a triangle going on. And then you've got some other configuration down here. It's quite a popular set of energies. You can see down here quite a few planets, 7 altogether, down from this is called the bottom of the chart, all the way to the 6th house here. This achievement triangle for her really stands out because it's composed of her north node up here in the 11th house, and her south node down here with Jupiter, the Sun, and Mercury down here. I realize this is quickly becoming technical astrological jargon, so bear with me, please. And the output of it all, where this achievement triangle tries to release its energy, is through the 2nd house, really, of magnitude, right, in Sagittarius. And it's not going to be subtle, right, with Pluto and the moon at the apex. That's quite a powerhouse. The reason I'm saying this is because that's the main thrust of this chart. Yes, there's some Mars and Venus that's not really integrated in the chart and what have you, but strikingly, when you walk into this chart, we see this massive achievement triangle, staring at us. And that needs to release the energy. Essentially, it's a part of the psyche. It tells us that this individual needs to release whatever is on this polarity axis here through Pluto and the moon. It needs to resolve itself. If you've read any books on kind of dualism, polarities, what have you, in synthesis, this visually shows there's something over here and something over here. In synthesis, psychosynthesis, we want all members of the proverbial hockey team or in the birth chart to get along, play along as best they can on any given day so that we can integrate and be effective in life. Now, I'm not making a judgment call that she's effective or not. I have actually no idea. I've only heard the basic parameters of her kind of life moments and what have you. But when you're looking at this chart, we know that this sequence down here, especially the stellium of hers, the Sun, Jupiter, Mercury, and the South Node, needs to be kind of understood and related to this sequence up here, which is the North Node. So to keep it simple in astrology is that we do use this North Node, South Node axis, some more, some less than others. In Huber, we're not afraid of it. And we can get some gleamings of points of growth within the North Node. We have a lot of areas of growth within the birth chart, so we don't want to overstep it. But with the North Node in the 11th house, and then the South Node in the 5th house, we can actually highlight this axis for a second, and I'll see if I can explain. I got my fancy marker here. Oh, here we go. Okay, so it's this axis here we're talking about. Now, there's lots of ideas of polarity in a birth chart, like I was saying, but along this axis is a North Node, South Node, and this stellium down below. What we ideally want to have is an integration along this axis within the psyche. Now, the North Node, the 11th house, this area of the chart of our psyche is about coming into our chosen groups of friends, our moralities, stepping away from the collective into what we truly, I guess, believe in, our values, our deep-seated conscious values, right, that we can truly get into. In Virgo, you could, just keep it simple here. I don't want to make a mountain of a molehill, but you think of what Virgo does, try to clean up the universe, so you can start to think of perhaps some level of purity, of cleaning up, of kind of helping and whatnot. Down here it's not overly important at this stage, by the way, this sign. That's why I'm not really speaking too much about it. The other end of that polarity is the South Node. So the South Node can reflect areas that we've already kind of stepped into from past lives. We're already comfortable with. We've already kind of ridden that horse, if you will, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. So we don't want to reject it. It's actually really strong tools for us. So you can play. What we want to do then is not try to fabricate a story, but for Chappell Roan's chart, we do know that she's a big-time musical performer, an artist, right now. So we know from fractional analysis that that's not too much of a hard sell, meaning we can look at her chart and see these patterns as truth, right? She is a big performer, and the opposite of this 11th house down here is this 5th house, which is about creativity, the artist. It's all about the common collective as well, too. It's where we have to kind of duke it out with the real world and the games people play. It's a more unconscious area of the chart, and down here we have to kind of learn to, merge and flow with others, and get on as best we can. This tension then of being with your chosen moralities, of this smaller, perhaps limited group of friends, and where you want to be, is in contrast to being down here and thrusted into the 5th house. So I have a fifth house sun as well too, but mine's completely different than hers, as astrology would convince us. What we can speak to though here is it's obviously a beautiful chart for a creative performer, right? But with her age point now, we can see, I'm going to switch gears to this. Her age point is exactly over top and has moved through quite a bit through a period of time, and is now staring down at Jupiter. It's squaring, I can turn this off, and it's squaring this Pluto moon configuration. That's quite intense. Now, this doesn't mean that she's going to, in House of Self-Worth, realize that she's a nuclear reactor, which I know we want to say whenever we have Pluto aspects. I don't know what would have happened to her. I would have known that she was going to be successful moving through this. So I'm just working with what's in front of me. With the age point over this, we get a lot of magnitude with Jupiter, right? The planet of expansion. We've got the sun's will and Mercury. It's almost too easy and perfect to look at this chart and then backwards, right, after the events have taken place, after she's already successful, to speak to, wow, look at this, Chappell Roan was so successful, and look at his age points. What I'm trying to say is I wouldn't have known that if the age point was here and I was consulting with her. I wouldn't say that this is going to be her big moment. But what we can say is that with the age point system, this is a once in a lifetime period where her age point will be conjuncting and staring down this main stellium of hers. And it is a period in her life where, with the square aspect forcing action into this achievement triangle, right? Both the age point is connecting with it here, and it's also squaring the apex point where that energy is released. That this is big. We can say that. And that not necessarily good nor bad, but for her, she's, I think, probably quite easily holding a lot of space for herself and being challenged, and really kind of feeling that she is duking it out with the media and everything, right? Now, to help somebody in a situation like this is we can explain that this is a once in a lifetime period. We can explain her other charts that we haven't even brought in, and looking at it's about having our own moralities and values and growing into them and moving, holding that space, also realizing that we bring a lot of talent and magnitude and everything, right? I mean, that's a beautiful Jupiter, her sun and Mercury down here, holding that. How do you hold that? Do you want to hold that in the common collective that she brings a lot of enormity to, in concert with growing into a smaller group? So what could that look like? Well, it's squaring the moon and Pluto here. She could just give it all up. Or if we look at her chart as a point of growth and reference, the idea of perhaps synthesizing all these together, this is where it gets really interesting, because I've spoken about synthesis before. It's very rare that we have to give up all our values. In many cases, we can find a synthesis between the two. In other words, we can jig them a little bit. How do you have the fame plus be the philanthropist, right? The Rolling Stones, I think, been able to pull that off. I think that's quite arguable. A lot of artists have. You don't have to. She doesn't have to either. But for her, sinking into the values, what's important for her now, showcasing that this will all be kind of moving through, as it will, and on to the next thing, relatively as we're speaking, okay? So the enormity of that Pluto square will be felt right around her birthday time in the end of February. Likewise, to her moon is kind of culminating at the end, literally end of this year, end of December. And she's going to be working through this opposition to that north node all the way, culminating really next September, but it's going to take its toll on for the length of 2026, and there's some new conscious raising around Uranus, which is reflected here with this is called a semi-sextile and raises consciousness. All to say, this is the moment of big kind of challenges and work-throughs to perhaps bridge those in, or to not bridge them in. Perhaps she just says, screw it all, I'm going to be a famous artist and I'm going to eat green M&Ms all day long. Or she says, screw it all, I'm going to give it all up and go hang out with my philanthropy friends up top here. Obviously, it's client's prerogative, client's choice, and client's life. When she's going completely, perhaps, as my colleague said, berserker with the media, and also relating that there's a purpose behind it, and that's trying to kind of find its way through the Pluto and the Moon, which is going to be an intense volcanic level of emotion and everything, and that's important. We can then turn around and look at the archetypes of the Moon and of Pluto, which Pluto represents our prototype and our highest kind of pneuma at that level. It can be used for great purposes, or we can simply fly into the flame if we don't use Pluto properly. Likewise with the Moon, we can become over emotional, or we can be childlike and open and spontaneous. So I doubt that in an hour and a half you would unpack this with Chappell Roan if she was in the room with me here. However, I think within a relatively small amount of sessions we could start to understand her needs and her values now, and speak a lot more in depth to her chart than even I'm doing. But the idea being, if we can even look at this point in her time, that she's not going crazy or unnecessarily, or that we can validate her processes and her emotions and speak to what's important for her, engaging her will, and through this kind of depth psychology moment in time method that we're so fortunate to have through astrology, so that she can make hopefully more conscious decisions, and we would take this back to making our decisions right from here, right from the chart center. Oh, I'm going to get a better actual arrow here. Sorry. Right from here. We want to be able to make our decisions from here, and not when some transit or our age point is simply doing it from Jupiter or forcing a decision from Pluto and the Moon here. Lastly, I'll say what's important is the past, and we can see that there's quite a bit actually that took place back here. Oh, that's the wrong arrow again as well. My apologies. Get a screen draw here. We can see that back in 2007, 2008-ish, it just depends. There'd be quite a period here, actually. What I looked up for her biographical stuff is this is, I think, when her mother introduced her to Pink's album, and I forget the name of it. It's something to do with, let me just bring it up here. Okay, brought it up, and thanks to ChatGPT, I said what happened in 2008. She was a child growing up in Willard, Missouri, conservative environment, yada, yada, yada. During this time, her early interest in music was beginning to take shape, and her mother actually got her the Pink's Misunderstood album, which she listened to obsessively. Extremely influenced her musical inclinations, etc., etc. So did Stevie Nicks, Karen Carpenter, who she tried to emulate as a child. Okay, so the context of this birth chart around breaking free from the collective in a highly conservative environment is going to be much different than if you grew up downtown New York City, or in somewheres in maybe Venice Beach or something like that. The context of this chart is this inspired individual that is trying to grow into and express her moralities, her perspective on the world in a very conservative area. So that alone gives a lot of context to somebody and their timing systems in astrology, and especially with their age point. timing system as we see now. So, all to say, I have no idea what's going to happen to Chappell Roan. We can take a look at her age point dates and see the major influences coming up, which are really, really useful, and what have you. But more importantly is to kind of work, celebrate, and support clients moving through their major life phases, which I think this age point system highlights extremely well, that this is a once in a lifetime period to, I don't want to say get it right, but to consciously walk into her life and chart and know that she's not just picking fights with the media, or that it's, that she's going crazy beyond repair, and that she has no kind of, there's no purpose or kind of meaning or value behind it. So we want to take things back to that level and give assurances that, yes, these timing periods are accurate. We can observe them through astrology, and we can make decisions too, because we absolutely have a will, or at least we seemingly think we do, and we should absolutely believe we do, and work hard to kind of grow and develop, no matter what's happening to us. So on that note, I'm going to end. I said I'd be short, and I'm now at 21.5 minutes.